business owners and executives from around the Valley. This is Business Leaders with Lance Cardoza.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to Business Leaders. I'm Lance Cardoza, and on today's show, it's very special to me because I'm very close to this company. It's called SYNEXIS Biodefense System and the SYNEXIS DHP, and we're going to talk about DHP and what does that mean, DHP, on today's show. And all the way from Kansas City, CEO of SYNEXIS, Eric Schlote. Thank you for being on the program.
Good to be here, Lance.
Hey, Eric, we spent a good part of today running around Fresno and seeing some of the clients here in Fresno that use SYNEXIS Biodefense System. And it's pretty remarkable what DHP is. Tell us a little bit about what is SYNEXIS.
So in order to understand how we got here, I think it's important to understand the origins of the system. And it really came out of a military application. Our founder, his name's Jim Lee, was in the Army Chemical Corps and was actually doing some work in risk mitigation of high-rise buildings in New York, and realized that there was a technology void in preventing a bio attack. So really the genesis of this technology goes back to a military application. So what he invented was something called DHP, or dry hydrogen peroxide, and very unique. So the system uses the ambient humidity, what's already in the air, and converts it into a dry hydrogen peroxide that's essentially what you have in your medicine cabinet as far as the molecule, but it's completely void of water. And very distinct differences. One is that it goes into the air just like humidity or oxygen, and it's not corrosive, so it doesn't damage anything like some of the aqueous hydrogen peroxide. And it makes the air itself a disinfectant.
So I don't think a lot of people know too, and being close to this product and working in the entertainment industry, we've offered this through our company Capital International to entertainers and also venues that are looking to create consumer confidence, but not only create consumer confidence, keep their employees safe. And when people come back, be able to truly effectively put a product in place that has peer-reviewed studies around it. And DHP, like you were talking about, the brown bottle of hydrogen peroxide, I didn't realize there was only 3% of hydrogen peroxide in that aqueous brown bottle.
Exactly.
So the same effect there, they use that humidity in the air to create the molecule.
That's right.
As a part of it.
And we've thought about things a little bit differently from the beginning. My background's medical devices, so I'm used to generating a lot of data, and a lot of what you mentioned is peer-reviewed data. And I think it's important for people to understand, what does that mean? And it's basically doing a study to show efficacy in a real-world environment that meets the level of being published in a journal, meaning that a group of experts has looked at the data and it's statistically relevant. So we're a very data-driven company in terms of that, and we're the only company in this space that has not just one peer-reviewed study, we have 6.
And not only in peer-reviewed studies, when you say outside of SYNEXIS, professional sports teams, the LA Dodgers, and if you think of anybody that's going to be very stringent on making sure this is healthy and safe around high net worth employees, like a Major League Sports, the Dodgers would have done that, and they're big champions of SYNEXIS.
They are, and it's been over 3 years since we've been in the Dodgers. They're very happy with the results, but also hospitals. You know, we've done a lot of trials and work in hospitals, and we're very focused now on return to work, return to school, K through 12, higher education. Yeah,
so that was going to ask you too, is that with SYNEXIS is who, when we first discovered it, we're talking, who's the end user?
Right.
And it's pretty much anybody in an indoor occupied space, correct?
It is. So the unique thing about dry hydrogen peroxide is you don't know it's in the space. So you can't see it, you can't smell it. It does reduce odors or volatile organic compounds, which are contaminants that are in the space. And one of the only products that breaks that down into basically back down into water. And so that's very important to keep these spaces, free of microbial, not only microbial reductions, but also other contaminants.
Pretty cool. It's amazing technology. Eric, I know that you probably going to school and studying and trying to figure out what you're going to do in your career. Probably didn't know you were going to work in biodefense and at this high level. of an incredible technology. What was your focus when you were growing up, and did you see yourself working here in this space?
I didn't really necessarily see myself working in this space, but you know, I went to school in the Midwest, and I got 4 boys, so of course, you know, getting them back to school and making sure that you know, there's a safe environment for them to be back in school. But as far as, you know, working for this company, it's been pretty remarkable, because I've been able to take my experience in the medical device industry over the past 25 years and really put it, that experience and just the, you know, the level of data, because this is a, a market where a lot of claims are being made, and especially around since we've started the pandemic, and a lot of these claims aren't substantiated. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is generating very good data, but also educating people. Because if you're making a decision for your facility, for your school, or anywhere else, you want to make sure that you're making the best decision you can for the people that are in those occupied spaces. And we believe we're setting the bar. We're setting a high standard on generating this type of data. And the other thing that's interesting about this whole space, most of these other companies and devices are generating ozone. And it's very important to understand that ozone builds up over time. Your body doesn't have a natural defense to it like it does dry hydrogen peroxide. Your body just breaks it down. So, so I think we're setting a new standard here for data.
Beautiful stuff. And it has other corollary benefits. And I think through the technology, from what I understand, when Jim Lee, the founder of the company, and reading a little bit of its history, it was a defense against anthrax.
That's correct.
In its early days.
That's correct.
And also has corollary benefits of the issue of mitigating with insects. And you can tell us about that, as also what DHP does within its insects? It
does, and we found out some of the you know, added benefits. We found out a little bit by accident, to be honest. So, you know, we know that in a lot of environments, to your point, microbial reduction, making sure that these environments are you know, safe to come into. And it's not only just COVID. We're not just a COVID company. So, you know, mold, and also other contaminants, as I mentioned. But one of the things that we did early on, to get to your insect question, is we did a lot of work in the poultry space, because there's a lot of animals that are very close together, and people were trying to find out ways to remove formaldehyde at that point, and antibiotics. So we found out that we can get rid of insects as well. We can talk more about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. And if you're watching this and you want more information about SYNEXIS' biodefense system, and like I said, there's several companies here in Fresno. Scan the QR code, pick up your mobile phone, hold it up to the screen and scan, and you can find out more information. We'll be right back with Eric.
Business Leaders with Lance Cardoza.
Welcome back to Business Leaders here on KMPH Fox 26. I'm Lance Cardoza. And before the break, we were talking about SYNEXIS' biodefense system and how SYNEXIS is indoor mitigation against not only the pathogens that we're dealing with during the pandemic, but it's also a bunch of other corollary benefits to DHP, dry hydrogen peroxide in its gas phase. Joining me on the program still CEO Eric Schlote with SYNEXIS, and we were talking before the break, you were talking about its impact on insects, because insects, from what I understand, don't have lungs.
Correct.
And our lungs produce hydrogen peroxide.
That's correct.
And that's an irritant to them, but very safe for us as humans.
That's right. So I started to talk about the poultry industry, and so we had a lot of positive impacts of microbial reduction on eggs, and taking out antibiotics, for example, and formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen. And we found that the birds hatched. More of the birds hatched, and they weighed more in certain circumstances. But the corollary benefit was, the workers in these poultry facilities, there were no flies. So we started to study why that happens. And as you mentioned, our lungs process hydrogen peroxide. Insects don't have lungs. And so basically it becomes an irritant to them. So what we found is that the first thing they'll want to do is evacuate the environment, because it's an irritant. If they can't, they actually will go dormant and eventually die. So so it is, these insects either are a nuisance, but particularly in food applications, they can be vectors for cross-contamination of microbes.
I can see where this is perfect for restaurants and any indoor occupied space, but a restaurant, especially with insects, that it's going to mitigate against that. And now your neighbor has your insect problem.
Yeah, that's right.
So they're going to need SYNEXIS as well.
That's right.
So and through that, from what I understand also too, that DHP is very different than a lot of the biggest competition to SYNEXIS is misinformation, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, mainly because of the pandemic.
Right.
I think people repackaged things that probably didn't work back when, and brought it back to light because of the pandemic, and we battled that, and the information that we've seen with DHP.
So one of the things that our clients appreciate is just the transparency that we have with our data, and letting them do pilots if they want and get their own data. So we're very transparent, we're very confident in our devices. But these people are getting bombarded. There's ionizers and ozonators and filters and all of these UV lights and all of these things, and certainly
electrostatic sprayers.
and all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And some of these devices certainly have a place. And you're part of a layered approach. The challenge here in this space, to your point about the misinformation, is, so for example, SYNEXIS, we spent a lot of time, money, and effort developing this system. We are the sole source developer of dry hydrogen peroxide. So we have patents. We have almost 50 issued patents and a couple hundred patents that are pending on applications. So very distinctive in that part of it. So sometimes in this space, people say that they do what we do, and they don't. So, but everybody. The good thing about the pandemic, I will say, Lance, is that the consumer, right, which is what we want them to make educated decisions, whoever that decision maker is, and they're educating themselves. So they're asking for the studies, and a lot of these other companies are doing studies for COVID, for example, in a very small box. And that's not the way that a study should be conducted. And the way we do a study is in a normal size room that accounts for the natural die-off that would occur with that virus, for example. And then we reproduce that. And our COVID data meets the level of criteria to be published.
Yeah, and some of that published review too, you're talking about with the virus, but well before the pandemic, such as C. diff and Aspergillus niger black mold. And looking at the field data, the benchmark is never returns to the microbial level with DHP in the space. And when you look at all these different possibilities or scenarios in a indoor occupied space that we deal with, and I think the pandemic made us focus on those indoor occupied spaces.
And that part I think has been good, because indoor air quality, pandemic or not, is very important. There's a lot of studies that show productivity and production with less sick days and all of that. But when you look at the new steady state baseline that you were just talking about, there's a couple things that first of all people should think about when they're making decisions about indoor air quality devices. One, we are part of a layered approach. So you're wiping down countertops and doorknobs. You have filtration systems. But we augment those types of practices because we're in the air all the time and we're not relying on the air exchange itself. So if you and I are sitting here and somebody's shedding a virus or there's a mold, DHP would be in this space, and we're mitigating that risk immediately and not waiting for that to go through a return air system.
To go to the return air system, so as it's encountering molecule right now. That's right. Including on surfaces? Including on surfaces. Surfaces as well.
So again, one of the only systems that has microbial reduction to reduce microbes on air and on surfaces and in the air. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah.
Wow. So. And with DHP technology, and solely owned and patented by SYNEXIS Biodefense System.
100%. And there's a couple criteria I think that are important when you're evaluating these. One, you should have peer-reviewed data that we have. Very important. Number two, you should have lab data that accounts for natural die-off. It's in a normal size room, which we do. We are California CARB compliant with all of our devices. I think companies that have ozone generating devices and non-ozone generating devices should be a little suspect. There's no reason that you should have an ozone generating device,
and
in my view.
SYNEXIS produces no ozone.
All of our devices do not produce ozone, and we're actually UL 2998 is what it's called, but that's actually a higher higher scrutiny for low, basically no ozone.
Wow. SYNEXIS, so you're watching the show and you're thinking it's almost too good to be true. And when we were looking at it for entertainers, as entertainers travel in our tour buses or concerts, it was too good to be true. But when you looked at the peer review studies and the information, I had to have you on my program. And I know in the city of Fresno we have it out there. We're going to look at the devices that deploy SYNEXIS when we return here on Business Leaders Don't Go Away. Welcome back to Business Leaders here on KMPH Fox 26. We've been talking about SYNEXIS' biodefense system. The SYNEXIS biodefense system creates DHP, dry hydrogen peroxide, in its gas phase, and it's an amazing product. The CEO of SYNEXIS, Eric Schlote, here on the program Business Leaders, came all the way out from Kansas City, meeting with clients and customers here in Fresno, and I'm glad you came on my show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
The devices, the deployment of SYNEXIS,
right.
And it's pretty simple. It's pretty amazing technology, but it's very effective. Talk to me about how is it deployed?
Yeah, so the first thing is that we're not relying on the air exchange, which is a key distinction. And also, as DHP goes into a space and kills a microbe, it turns right back into humidity. So very ingenious and doesn't
no
build
byproduct.
up. No byproduct.
No byproduct. Okay.
So we have a couple different ways to deploy it. One way is in the HVAC, the HVAC system. It basically goes in the duct, out of sight, out of mind, and puts the DHP in the space.
Is that called the blade?
That's called the blade. That's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And then we have the standalone plug-and-play version. We have two of those. One's called the Sphere, and that's typically what we use for classrooms, dorm rooms, offices. So it's more of a plug and play. It can go sit literally on a table, plug it in, or it can be mounted on a wall. Yep. And it's the same type of technology. It just has a fan that takes the air through the device itself and creates the DHP. And then we also have the Sentry, which is our more industrial version, a little bit louder device, but we use those for industrial applications, poultry facilities, places where noise isn't that much of an issue,
like
gyms, cafeterias,
facilities.
things
Okay.
of that nature. Yeah, that's right.
I can see gyms would be an amazing place for the Sentry unit.
That's right. Yeah.
And so what is a device, what square footage? Because I'm sure that question, if someone's watching at home, and you can scan that QR code, and if you're a business that's looking to implement a biodefense system or to create consumer confidence or bring your employees back into the space confidently, you can scan that code, get some information, be directed right to SYNEXIS, and we'll be able to answer those questions for you. But how do you what does it cover? So you got the blade, you have the Sphere, and you have the Sentry. What is the coverage to get an idea for each of those devices?
Sure. So on average, the blade and the Sphere are between 1,000 and 1,200 square feet or so in a normal 8 to 10 foot ceiling, and then the Sentry is around 2,500 square feet. And what we do, we've become very good at looking at a space, looking at a plan. We've done remotely a lot of this, given the nature of business now. But we can take somebody's plans and lay out what we would recommend as a rollout plan for this in an office or whatever. And usually it's a combination of all three of those devices.
Absolutely, it's amazing, and I truly, every time I talk to anybody with SYNEXIS, it's always you learn something a little more, and I'm sure in this space, as we're evolving through this pandemic together and trying to figure out what is the best way to mitigate, you have the rock star of all the devices and the sole device of DHP in its gas phase.
Well, we've worked hard to get data. I mean, it's no accident that we have relationships with key strategic large companies because we've done the work, and because our data can be duplicated over and over again in different applications, and the type of data that we have, not just on COVID. So we're not just a COVID company, and I think I should point out that we do a lot with mold. A lot of the dorm rooms and the universities that we started to put the device in before the pandemic was around mold. And we think that as businesses return and people start to reopen, a lot of these HVAC systems have been, not operating for a number of months, and mold is going to be a concern, I think, going forward.
And at theaters and arenas and tour buses that we deal with, we're seeing that. They've been sitting for a long time, and there's a lot of mitigation that needs to happen. And I think it really has opened people's eyes to looking at your indoor air quality and your indoor space, and to keep your employees safe and keep your family safe. And there's maybe a residential component to this. We're taking a look at the Sphere, the SYNEXIS device. And tell us a little bit, as people look at this device, what are we looking at, and how does that work? So there's an air intake in the front?
Yeah, so the air intake is in the front, and it's a simple fan, pulls the air in, and then it goes through a bulb, a light bulb, which is a UVA, which is like a black light. And then there's a proprietary catalyst that the air gets pushed through, and that is where the interaction of the water molecule converts to the dry hydrogen peroxide molecule.
That's the genius of the
product. That's the genius of the system. It's very simple, but sophisticated at the same time.
Incredible. And from what I understand, a very fragile molecule that's being placed in the air that just reproduces itself as the device is being ran, because it runs 24/7.
That's right.
And puts it out into the air in a low energy consumption too on the device.
That's right. So very low energy consumption, and also, we're putting less than 10 parts per billion in the space. So this is highly effective at very low concentrations.
This is incredible stuff, and I was very excited to have you on Business Leaders. And again, all the way from Kansas City, and came out here to talk to us about it. And anybody at home, if you look at this or you want to bring this to your place of business, there's that code. Pull out your mobile phone and make sure you scan that, and we'll get information out to you to help you out in your indoor air quality with SYNEXIS and DHP. Any final thought?
No, I just appreciate your time, and we're excited to see where we're going to go.
Awesome. And I know everybody that has DHP raves about it. And if anybody in Fresno knows Cornerstone Church with Pastor Franklin, he's one of the big champions here in Fresno and has it for his congregation. So a little plug for Cornerstone. Thank you for joining us here on Business Leaders. We'll see you next week, Tuesday morning at 11 a.m.